All right, great. Good morning, good morning. My name is Bill Bossing, and I'm an instructor here in the English department at Wake Tech. And I'm here to welcome all of you to this year's visiting author reading and to welcome our wonderful guest here to our community. That word, community, it's right there in the middle of the name of our school. But it feels like sometimes in the last few years we've had to focus more on the technological, right? Thanks to live streaming and Blackboard and Teams meeting and emails and SharePoints, it's sometimes hard to remember that community is at the heart of what we do here. So I can think of no better person than ETAF RUM, our guest today, to help us celebrate the power of community, of all our communities. Ms. Rum is the author of the celebrated novel, A Woman Is No Man. And when I say celebrated, I mean celebrated. It was a New York Times bestseller. It was the subject of celebrity book clubs and many non-celebrity book clubs too, including Wake Tech's own student book club. We'll be talking about it in a couple of weeks. In the time since the publication of that novel. She's been busy writing her next novel, Evil Eye, which comes out later this year. And of course, she's been nurturing her own communities online and just down the road from us. And I can think of no better day than today, March 8th, International Women's Day, the day that around the world we celebrate the political and cultural and artistic achievements of women. Come to think of it, shouldn't every day be International Women's Day? I mean, really. I can think of no better person and no better day because Ms. Rum's writing so beautifully explores women finding their own power, finding their own agency within the sometimes nurturing, sometimes confining, sometimes dangerous dynamic of family and tradition. And her words remind us so powerfully that at the heart of almost every community and every family, there are women finding their voices and women sharing their voices. So, please help me thank Ms. Rum for sharing her voice with us today and help me welcome her into our community. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, you'll need this to amplify your voice. Here you go. Thanks.
Mic check one. It's good? All right. Well, thank you so much to Wake Tech, to the faculty for having me here. This is a beautiful campus. I fell in love the minute I walked through and met all of the students and all of the faculty. Makes me reminisce for my time as a teacher. Before I start reading, I would like to give you a brief background of my story to kind of set this book in context. My parents immigrated to Brooklyn, New York, and had 9 children. I am the eldest of the 9 children. I grew up in a very sheltered home, and I knew deep down that I wanted to help amplify the stories of our women, Palestinian women, whose stories are often underrepresented in literature. And this is where A Woman Is No Man began, that seed of wanting to tell our stories and wanting to have a space in our libraries and our bookshelves for these women who are resilient and powerful and who are often unseen and unheard. And this is where A Woman Is No Man began. I'm gonna read the first chapter of the story. I think it'll really help set the scene of how this story came to be. A fun fact, I actually wrote this chapter after the book had already been written. So the book was already written, and something about it wasn't complete for me. And about a month before it was set to release, my editor asked me to write an author's letter to help set the story. And once I wrote it, I realized that that had to be the first chapter. And I hope when you listen to it, you'll understand why. I was born without a voice, one cold, overcast day in Brooklyn, New York. No one ever spoke of my condition. I did not know I was mute until years later, when I'd opened my mouth to ask for what I wanted and realized no one could hear me. Where I come from, voicelessness is the condition of my gender. As normal as the bosoms on a woman's chest, as necessary as the next generation growing inside her belly. But we will never tell you this, of course. Where I come from, we've learned to conceal our condition. We've been taught to silence ourselves, that our silence will save us. It is only now, many years later, that I know this to be false. Only now, as I write this story, do I feel my voice coming. You've never heard this story before. No matter how many books you've read, how many tales you know, believe me, no one has ever told you a story like this one. Where I come from, we keep these stories to ourselves. To tell them to the outside world is unheard of, dangerous, the ultimate shame. But you have seen us. Take a walk in New York City on a sunny afternoon. Walk down the length of Manhattan until the streets become curved and tangled as they are in the old world. Go east over the Brooklyn Bridge, Manhattan skyline thinning behind you. There will be a heavy traffic jam on the other side. Hail a yellow cab and ride it down Flatbush Avenue, that central artery of South Brooklyn. You'll go south on 3rd Avenue, where the buildings are smaller, only 3-4 stories high, with old faces. The Verrazano Bridge hovers on the horizon like a giant gull, wings spread, the sweeping view of the Manhattan skyline, now a distant mirage. Head south for a while, past the warehouses refurbished into chic cafes and trendy oyster bars, and the small family-owned hardware stores that have been there for generations. When the American cafes start to thin, replaced by signs in foreign tongues, you'll know you're getting close. Cross east 2 blocks to 5th Avenue. There you will find Bay Ridge. Our 3-square-mile neighborhood is the melting pot of Brooklyn. On our streets, you'll find Latinos, Middle Easterners, Italians, Russians, Greeks, and Asians, all speaking their native tongues, keeping their traditions and cultures alive. Murals and graffiti cover the building. Colorful flags hang from windows and balconies. The sweet smell of churros, shish kebabs, and potpourri fills the air, a stew of humanity converging. Get out at the corner of 72nd and 5th Avenue, where you'll find yourself surrounded by bakeries, hookah bars, and halal meat markets. Walk down the tree-lined sidewalk of 72nd Street until you reach an old row house, no different from the others. Faded red brick, a dusty brown door, number 545. This is where our family lives. But our story does not begin in Bay Ridge, not really. To get there, first we must turn back the pages to before I found my voice, before I was even born. We are not yet in the house on 72nd Street, not yet in Brooklyn, not yet in America. We have yet to board the plane that will carry us from the Middle East to this new world, have yet to soar over the Atlantic, have yet to even know that one day we will. The year is 1990, and we are in Palestine. This is the beginning. Thank you, guys. I wanted to start with these couple of pages that I wrote after the story was completed, because I thought that it was the piece that kind of tied the whole story together. The story is, by the time you read the story, you realize that it's actually written by one of the three characters. And by the end, she's the one, you realize that she's the one telling the story. So it made sense to start the story here before we start the story, before we go back. Usually I like to read this. It helps ground readers. It helps them understand if this is something that they'll like, or where the story is heading. I would be more than happy to read another scene if you'd like. I'd be happy to answer some questions. I kind of wanted to leave it up to you guys.
I'd love to hear a little bit more of your reading.
Yeah. I'm going to continue. Okay. For most of her 17 years, Isra Hadid cooked dinner with her mother daily, rolling grape leaves on warm afternoons, or stuffing spaghetti squash, or simmering pots of lentil soup when the air became crisp and the vineyards outside their home went empty. In the kitchen, she and Mama would huddle against the stove as if sharing a secret, steam swirling around them until the sunset cast a sliver of orange through the window. Looking out, the Hadids had a mountaintop view of the countryside, hillsides covered with red-tiled rooftops and olive trees, bright and thick and wild. Isra always cracked the window open because she loved the smell of figs and almonds in the morning, and at night, the rustling sounds of the cemeteries down the hill. It was late, and the call for Maghrib prayer would soon come, bringing an end to the cooking. Isra and Mama would withdraw to the bathroom, rolling up the sleeves of their nightgowns, washing the dull red sauce off their fingertips. Isra had been praying since she was 7 years old, kneeling beside Mama 5 times a day between sunrise and sunset. Lately, she had begun to look forward to prayer, standing together with Mama, shoulders joined, feet slightly grazing, the only time Isra ever felt human touch. She heard the thick sound of the adhan calling them for prayer. Maghrib prayer will have to wait today, Mama said in Arabic, looking out the kitchen window. Our guests are here. There was a knock at the front door, and Mama hurried to the sink, where she gave her hands a quick rinse and dried them with a clean rag. Leaving the kitchen, she wrapped a black thobe around her small frame and a matching hijab over her long dark hair. Though Mama was only 35 years old, Isra thought she looked much older, the lines of labor dug deeply into her face. She met Isra's eyes. Don't forget to wash the garlic smell off your hands before greeting our guests. Isra washed her hands, trying not to dirty the rose-colored kaftan that Mama had chosen for the occasion. Do I look okay? You look fine, Mama said, turning to leave. Be sure to pin your hijab properly so your hair doesn't show. We don't want our guests to get the wrong impression. Isra did as she was told. In the hall, she could hear her father, Yaqub, recite his usual salam as he led the guests to the sala. Soon, he would hurry to the kitchen and ask for water, so she grabbed 3 glass cups from the cupboard and prepared them for him. Their guests would often complain about the steep hillside pathway to their home, especially on days like this, when the air grew hot and it felt as though their house sat only a few inches from the sun. Isra lived on one of the steepest hills in Palestine. On a piece of land Yaqub claimed to have purchased for the mountain view, which made him feel powerful, like a king. Isra would listen quietly to her father's remarks. She never dared tell him how far from powerful they really were. The truth was, Yaqub's family had been evacuated from their seaside home in the Lid when he was only 10 years old, during Israel's invasion of Palestine. This was the real reason they lived on the outskirts of Birzeit, on a steep hill overlooking two graveyards, a Christian cemetery on the left and a Muslim one on the right. It was a piece of land no one else wanted and all they could afford. Still, Isra loved the hilltop view of Birzeit. Past the graveyards, she could see her all-girls school, a 4-story cement building laced with grapevines, and across from it, separated by a field of almond trees, the blue-domed mosque where Yaqub and her 3 brothers prayed, while she and Mama prayed at home. Looking out the kitchen window, Isra always felt a mixture of longing and fear. What lay beyond the edges of her village? Yet as much as she wanted to go out there and venture into the world, there was also a comfort and safety in the known, and Mama's voice in her ear, reminding her, a woman belongs at home. Even if Isra left, she wouldn't know where to go. Should I keep going?
Don't stop.
Okay. Brew a kettle of shay, Yaqub said, as he entered the kitchen and Isra handed him the glasses of water and a few extra mint leaves. Isra needed no telling. She knew the customs by heart. Ever since she could remember, she had watched her mother serve and entertain. Mama always set a box of McIntosh's chocolate on the coffee table in the sala when they had guests. And she always served roasted watermelon seeds before bringing out the bitlawa. The drinks too had an order, mint shay first and Turkish coffee last. Isra had once overheard a woman tell of a time she'd been greeted with a cup of Turkish coffee at a neighbor's house. I left immediately, the woman had said. They might as well have kicked me out. Isra reached for a set of red and gold porcelain cups, listening for Mama in the sala. She could hear Yaqub chuckle over something now, and then the sound of other men laughing. Isra wondered what was so funny. A few months before, the week she turned 17, Isra had returned from school to find Yaqub sitting in the sala with a young man and his parents. Each time she thought of that day, the first time she'd been proposed to, what stood out most was Yaqub yelling at Mama after the guests left, furious that she hadn't served the shay in the antique set of cups they saved for special occasions. Now they will know we are poor, Yaqub had shouted, his open palm twitching. Mama had said nothing, quietly retreating to the kitchen. Their poverty was one of the reasons Yaqub was so eager to marry off Isra. His sons were the ones who helped him plow the field and earn a living, and who would one day carry on the family name. A daughter was only a temporary guest, quietly awaiting another man to scoop her away, along with all her financial burden. 2 men had proposed to Isra since, a bread breaker from Ramallah and a cab driver from Nablus. But Yaqub had declined both. He couldn't stop talking about a family who was visiting from America in search for a bride. And now Isra understood why he had been waiting for this suitor. Isra was unsure how she felt about moving to America, a place she'd only seen in the news or read about briefly in her school library. From them, she'd gathered that Western culture was not as rigid as their own. This filled her with both excitement and dread. What would become of her life if she moved away to America? How could a conservative girl like her adapt to such a liberal place? She had often stayed up all night thinking about the future, eager to know how her life would turn out when she left her father's house. Would a man ever love her? How many children would she have? What would she name them? Some nights she had dreamed she'd marry the love of her life and that they'd live together in a small hilltop house with wide windows and a red-tiled roof. Other nights she could see the faces of her children, 2 boys and 2 girls, looking up at her and her husband, a loving family like the kind she'd read about in books. But none of that hope came to her now. She had never imagined a life in America. She didn't even know where to begin, and this realization terrified her. She wished she could open her mouth and tell her parents, "No, this isn't the life I want." But Isra had learned from a very young age that obedience was the only path to love. So she only defied in secret, mostly with her books. Every evening, after returning from school, after she'd soaked the pot of rice and hung her brother's clothes and set the sufra and washed the dishes following dinner, Isra would retreat quietly to her room and read under the open window, the pale moonlight illuminating the pages. Reading was one of the many things Mama had forbidden, but Isra had never listened. She remembered once telling Mama that she couldn't find any fruit on the mulberry trees when in fact she had spent the afternoon reading in the graveyard. Yaqub had beaten her twice that night, punishment for her defiance. He'd called her a sharmuta, a whore. He'd said he'd show her what happened to disobedient girls. Then he'd shoved her against the wall and whipped her with his belt. The room had gone white. Everything had looked flat. She'd closed her eyes until she'd gone numb, until she couldn't move. But as fear rose up in Isra, thinking of those moments, so did something else, a strange sort of courage. Isra arranged the steaming cups on the serving tray and entered the sala. Mama said the trick to maintaining balance was to never look directly at the steam, so she looked at the ground instead. For a moment, Isra paused. From the corner of her eye, she could see the men and women sitting on opposite sides of the room. She peeked at Mama, who sat in her usual way, head bowed, eyes studying the red Turkish rug in front of her. Isra glanced at the pattern, spirals and swirls, each curling up in the exact same way, picking up where the last one ended. She looked away. She had the urge to steal a glimpse of the young man, but she could feel Yaqub eyeing her, could almost hear him in her ear. A proper girl never lays her gaze on a man. Isra kept her eyes toward the ground, but allowed herself a glance across the room. She noticed the younger man's socks, gray and pink, with white stitching across the top. They were unlike anything she'd ever seen on the streets of Birzeit. She felt her skin prickle. Clouds of steam rose from the serving tray, covering Isra's face, and quickly she circled around the room until she had served all the men. She walked over to serve the suitor's mother next. Isra noticed how the woman's navy blue hijab was tossed around her head as if by accident, barely covering her henna-stained hair, Isra had never seen a Muslim woman wear her hijab this way. Maybe on television, in the black and white Egyptian movies Isra and Mama watched, or in Lebanese music videos where women danced around in revealing clothing, or even in one of the illustrations of Isra's favorite book, 1001 Nights, a collection of Middle Eastern folk tales set in medieval times, but never in Birzeit. As Isra leaned in, she could see the suitor's mother studying her. She was a plump, stooping woman with a crooked smile and dark almond eyes that squinted at the corners. From her expression, Isra decided the woman must be displeased with her appearance. After all, Mama had often said that Isra was a plain girl, her face as dull as wheat, her eyes as black as charcoal. Isra's most striking feature was her hair, long and dark like the Nile. Only no one could see it now beneath her hijab. Not that it would have made a difference, Isra thought. She was nothing special. It was this last thought that stung Isra. As she stood before the suitor's mother, she could feel her upper lip trembling. She walked closer to the woman, clutching the serving tray in her hands. She could feel Yaqub glaring at her, could hear him clear his throat, could see Mama dig her fingers into her thighs. But Isra leaned in toward the woman anyway, the porcelain cup trembling, and asked, "Would you like some Turkish coffee?" Should I continue or should I stop?
Do we have questions?
Yeah? Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay, ma'am, did you know, obviously you know that your name spelled backwards is fate?
Yes, when people don't know how to spell it, I just tell them, it's fate spelled backwards.
So is that a common name?
Itaf means compassion in Arabic. It's pronounced itaf in English, in Arabic, and it means compassion. I think I'm the only ETAF RUM in the world.
And also,
But the name itaf is common, yes, in Arabic.
and one more question. You were the oldest of 9. How many boys were amongst those 9?
We were 6 girls and 3 boys, and the boys came at the end.
The boy
Came at the end.
at the end. Oh my God. Okay. Wow. How was that growing up? You probably had a very small apartment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And did you like share beds and?
We did, yeah. We lived in a 2-bedroom. Maybe at some points when it got too much, it was a 3-bedroom. My parents had a room. Some of the younger kids would sleep in their room, but like 5 or 6 of us would sleep in one room. We had like mattresses and stuff that we would like. My parents they struggled, so we weren't like rich or anything.
Are your parents still alive?
Mm-hmm.
What do they think of your book?
I think they're proud of me. I don't know if they've read it, so I'm not sure.
I bet they have. I bet at least one of them has. Your mom probably.
Maybe. Yes, yes.
Your name is beautiful.
Thank you so much. Thank you. What's your name?
Victoria.
Victoria. I love that name too.
Thank you.
I had a question
Yeah.
about your writing process.
Yeah.
When you're starting a new project, do you start with a voice or a conflict or one scene? Or does it just, you just write till something catches your attention?
So I was telling the creative writing students, which were so lovely, and I guess as a way to encourage them, that I never actually wanted to. I'm not a writer. I wrote this by accident. And what I mean by accident is that I didn't start with a process. This book started as a therapy assignment. I was writing in a journal to process trauma. After writing for months in this journal, at the time I was teaching at Nash Community College. I was teaching English 111, English 112, and when I was lucky, English 231, American British Lit, which was my favorite out of the three. But the canon is the traditional Western canon, of course, and I started to realize that as an Arab American, that Palestinian voices were so underrepresented. And although we have so many, Palestinian writers in Palestine and here, just their voices aren't amplified or heard. And so when I was writing in my journal, I realized, wait a minute, I can write. I love reading, so I can learn how to tell a story. I think readers naturally understand the nuances of a story. So I decided that I wanted to tell our story, or one version of what it means to be an Arab American. Of course, there's many different stories. There's no single story. This is one family telling one story, and I wanted to. Then I thought, all right, the process was, all right, this journal, it was first person, it was too personal. How do I take this idea and come up? And so I was like, all right, third person works better. It's a generational story, so more than one perspective would help. And after that, it was just trial and error.
You said you are not a writer. Do you consider yourself a teacher or something different?
Yes, I consider myself like someone that's here to help. I don't know how. I think I'm here to help people. I love teaching. I love being with students. I felt like I always connected with them. I hope my writing helps people. When I said that I don't consider myself a writer, I was telling the creative writing students that I wasn't trained in writing. I never had creative writing classes and stuff like that, but I had a story I had to tell. And I think that then made the writing happen. It wasn't that I was trained. In order to let them know to look inwards, to find their voice, to search for their story, that's labeling a writer. That's not helpful. Sometimes you have to kind of look inward and then, so I don't really label myself as a writer, more as someone that wants to help the world in whatever field that is. Teaching, writing, being a mom.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
From what you just said, that is extremely admirable. I think labeling yourself as a writer, I love writing, I enjoy the hobby, but I think labeling it as it spoils the richness of the story that you're trying to tell, and I think that's really admirable that you mentioned that, and it's a very beautiful story, and I wouldn't have been able to tell that you didn't have any experience training, and it's very beautiful.
Thank you. It was a lot of editing and books, reading books. They were my teachers. So
You can just tell us, it's just really good.
thank you so much, Victoria. Yes.
So as far as your self-consideration goes, you don't consider yourself a writer per se. Do you consider yourself a philanthropist?
Possibly. Yeah. And I think we're all sent here with a mission, I think, on this earth, and it's so varied, and it's different per stage. When I was writing A Woman Is No Man, I definitely was not a writer. I was a teacher, first and foremost, and I loved books. And now that I travel and speak at universities, and I like to tell students that, hey, I'm not a writer, not to downgrade what it means to be a writer. Obviously, I write all the time. I find true joy in writing because I just want to let them know that nothing really defines them. It's about the soul behind what you do, because sometimes we get so fixed on the idea of, I'm a writer, I need to get this publishing deal, I need to hit this list, I need to sell this many copies. And then you lose sight of, well, what's the point of what you're doing exactly? And so when I say I'm not a writer, it's not to downgrade being a writer. I obviously am a writer among other things, but I don't like to think of myself as a writer. I like to think of myself as a human being that's sent here to do good And that differs from day to day. What does it mean to do good? Is it philanthropy? Is it teaching? Is it coaching? Is it guiding? Is it writing? Is it crying? Is it, what is it? It's different. But great question. Yes?
My question is twofold. Do you think you have a Palestinian voice or an American voice? Second part of the question is, I'm an immigrant myself, and part of American culture is amazing, and I love it. And I like to teach people back home about how we can do things better in certain ways. But at the same time, I feel like there's so many goods in our culture that needs to be preserved. How do you balance those two things?
Oh my God. Both of those questions are amazing. The first one is, do I consider myself having a Palestinian voice or an American voice? Neither. It would be incomplete to say that I am an American or have an American voice. And it would be incomplete to say that I am an Arab with an Arabic voice, because I'm not either of them. I was born in this country and raised by immigrants who wanted to preserve our values and our customs. So I was raised in a very sheltered way. And I'm so grateful for it. As a child, I definitely was not grateful for it. But as an adult, now that I have children of my own, I understand that they gave me so much of my culture that helped make me this person now. Because if I was just an American with an American voice, I wouldn't have really experienced what it felt like to be raised by Arab parents, the hardships, the resilience, the struggle. So I don't feel like I belong in America or Palestine. I feel like I have one foot on one side of the globe and the other foot on the other side of the globe, and my voice is a mixture of the two. It can't be either, because I'm not. I'm not an American and I'm not an Arab. I'm an Arab American with an Arab American voice. For the second question is, there are a lot of, it can be difficult to balance both of those parts of you when you're an immigrant or a child of immigrants, because you have access to two worlds that unfortunately are deeply conflicting. Western culture and then the rest of the world are different, right? Westerners have the one way of doing things, and then Eastern, rest of the world culture has a different way of doing things. I'm live right now, so I'm not sure I want to answer your question. I will say that as a mother, although I am a Westerner and there are many beautiful things about Western culture, I think we've lost it. And in some things, not like political things, I just mean, there's something beautiful about your soul, about teaching our children about going deep within and having access to like our inner self and our inner intuition and things that are often lost in the West because of consumerism, capitalism. Our phones are constantly talking, social media. Those are all parts of Western culture that I think have like rotted us in a sense. So I try to balance, all right, kids, like we're in America, it's beautiful, but there are so many things like go out and pick some fruit off some trees, go in the grass, play outside. Here's some food that's made from scratch, that's not full of chemicals. Here, let's learn another language. Let's be aware that we're not the only humans on this planet, that there are so many different cultures and people and ways of living. Like the Western culture is not the global standard. And I think we're often raised like the global standard is the Western culture, like that's how we should live. That's not true. So I try to make sure that there's a balance in my home. So, yeah. Hopefully I'm not canceled. Just kidding.
So when we teach writing, we often talk about audience.
Mm-hmm.
We're writing for a specific audience.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, as you were turning your journals into a novel and making those decisions that you had to make about what to include and what exactly to add and what to take away and that sort of thing, did you have a specific audience in mind? And is there a
That one was really hard, finding the audience, because, well, number one, I didn't have a audience. I was writing for myself. So I was the audience, my inner child, me, my healing. And I was just getting it out, right? The versions of this novel before this one were even more explicit and angry. But I think at one point, I realized that I had the platform to tell the Arab American story, but to tell a Arab American story. And then I was so afraid that this Arab American story would then be translated into the Arab American story, which is so unfair, because there's a lot of graphic things in this novel that don't apply to many people, but did apply to my childhood and my experiences and the experiences of a lot of women that I knew. So it was, how do I not discriminate and stereotype a people who are already discriminated and stereotyped against? So that was really a struggle. But at the same time, there are so many women that are dealing with far worse situations than the ones in this book. Like, there are some women that are not dealing with these problems, and then there are some women that are dealing with these problems, and then there are some women that are dealing with even worse problems. So once I started realizing, okay, what do I want to tell, and should I take this out? I was afraid. Are people going to think I'm a traitor? It got to be a lot. Well, finally, what made me decide who my audience was is I wanted women of color from marginalized communities that don't have access to the emotional or like physical support to find themselves in this story. That to me was, all right, they're my audience. If they can read this book and see some hope in it, or maybe like realize something, have an epiphany, oh wait, this is familiar. Maybe not exactly, but it's kind of familiar. I should do something. I can break the cycle. I wanted the people that read this book to be the trailblazers or the ones that broke the cycle. I realized that I also kind of wrote it to like the book club readers too, in a sense. It was, because it wasn't just me, it's me and my team. And it's like, there's a lot of other people in there like, oh, well, clarify this. Well, I wouldn't clarify it for a Palestinian reading it, but I have to clarify it for a white person reading it. So my audience wasn't just like, it was my intention of who my audience was, and then, okay, well, who is actually gonna buy this book? You know, and what information do they need? And so I would say I had more than one audience. My soul had an audience, and then logistics had an audience, if that makes any sense. Yeah, but great question.
I had a question.
Yes.
You can probably tell from my accent, I'm from around not too far from Nash Community College.
Oh.
Now that you're, in the process, or maybe almost done with your second book, was it difficult to kind of like, in your mind, did you feel like you needed to close from this project to start on a new one, or did some of the same elements from your first novel, like, did you feel it bleeding over into the second? I'm just curious kind of about how you started now on the second round.
Thank you for that question. Unfortunately, when I wrote this novel, and then my life fell apart, and completely. And so, although it would have been great, like, oh, I'm healed, we're done, let's write the next Harry Potter. I don't know. It would have been nice to have that jump, and especially since this was very healing and therapeutic and just the best thing. I don't think I was done healing. So the second novel not bleeds, but shares many of some similar thematic elements. Of course, different completely, because I didn't write the same novel again. But there are some bleeding. There's some bleeding. I don't like to say this, but I'll say it. In this novel, Dia, the 18-year-old Arab American that tells the story, Isra's daughter, tells the story. It's kind of almost as if Isra's daughter got married, went to college, and how her life turned out after that. It's kind of like a continuation, but it's not. It's a totally separate novel with totally separate conflict, but at the heart of it, to me, it felt like a continuation. Well, what happens next to this girl? Like, with all this baggage, like, how does she navigate the real world? And how does she navigate motherhood? And how does she navigate marriage? Like, does she even know what love is? Like, how is she gonna do that? And so to me, Evil Eye was about figuring that part out again. But now that I'm done with Evil Eye, because that was even more painful to write than this one, for different reasons. It was just really painful. Now I'm like, I am never writing any autobiographical work ever again. I'm not. So I'm excited for what's to come because I feel like, I mean, none of us are all fully healed, but I feel like I've gotten it out of my system. All right, I'm at peace now. Let's move on.
Well, your strength is really inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Victoria?
I completely agree. Strength is amazing and it's absolutely beautiful. But so if in your future, if you're not doing another autobiography or anything like that, what do you think you would be interested in doing?
I would want to write something that helps the next generation or the younger generation feel more, to go inward. A story about going inward. I don't know what yet, but something like that. Maybe a screenplay, maybe a movie, maybe Disney will do something that's not about flight. I don't know. Like, that's where my mind is going.
Well, I'm very interested.
Thank you. Don't be shy.
When you say going,
I mean more spiritual, more following your intuition, being authentic, living an authentic life, not following society's standards. The plot isn't obviously there yet, but the themes are there. They're not about me. They're really more about the world, our children, the world they're coming into. Like, how do they leave our planet a better place? Something along those lines. It's not like a Palestinian story. I think as a Palestinian, I think I've done my duty. And I'm not saying I'm never gonna write, a story about Palestinians or Palestinian Americans. Sorry. I just mean that for now, I think I need a break. My soul is like, really needs a break from that. So something more fantastical or something different would be really good. Yes.
What impact did or does technology have when you're writing process? Like, for example, do you type your stories on a MacBook? Do you use a typewriter? Do you write them down?
Yes.
You said that it's like from your journal, so obviously at one point you wrote them.
Yeah.
But when you're like writing for purposes of like, publication or to send to your editor, what role does technology have in your?
Yeah, great one. I did write this on a notebook paper, in a notebook. The first draft of it, of course, not this. Obviously, I had to, Google Doc is my best friend. So all my best writing, though, happens in a notebook. All my best scenes, I remember this in that notebook in my book bag. Like, something about not having technology and having pen to paper and some solitude, you can purge. But of course, technology played a huge role. I mean, Google Docs has been a lifesaver for me. I've tried Microsoft Word. I've lost lots of good things because it crashes on me and it doesn't save. And I don't like it. But Google Doc has never failed me. So I haven't been writing anything. I haven't been writing anything that requires research yet. Most of it has been stuff. Like, I don't need to research it because this is my community. Like, I understand it. Like, Wikipedia is definitely not going to tell me the truth anyways, so I might as well just stick to what I know. But of course, like, as a writer, moving forward, if I ever want to write something in a different genre, I'll definitely I'll be researching things that I don't know, for sure.
In terms of bringing awareness of the experience of Palestinian or Middle Eastern women, were there any particular influences that you drew on? Like, I'm thinking particularly of Azar Nafisi or Khalid Hosseini.
Yes. Yes, I read through all the myths and fables, 1001 Nights, just to like understand what these women, like the role of women in our community. Women at Point Zero is really good. It's a novel that I didn't read it when I was writing because I think it came out right after, but it's a beautiful, beautiful book, Woman at Point Zero, and she's one of the best writers, Palestinian writers or Arab writers.
What's the name?
Woman at Point Zero.
What author?
I know, it's like, I'm drawing a blank right
I'm
now.
sorry.
No, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. I am literally drawing a blank. But another good, Hala Alian for Salt Houses is another really good one. They're all contemporary writers. I wasn't really brought up to read Palestinian. I didn't have access. And so even as I was writing A Woman Is No Man, I knew nothing aside from the generic, like 1001 Nights, everybody knows that. I had to really educate myself on.
Interestingly, most of the authors that I've read are Iranian.
Yeah, there are a lot.
And I'm thinking of everyone, her name starts with an R, her last name starts with an R, and she's written several novels about being a woman in Iran and her experiences.
I know who you're talking about.
You do, yeah.
Yeah, but my names, I'm not really good.
I cannot think of her name right now. And then there's a journalist who wrote Honeymoon in Tehran. So, yeah, I can't think of her name either.
Yeah, I'm really bad with names.
But yeah, but I haven't, expanding beyond that Iranian culture, I don't know of a lot of authors, particularly women.
Yeah,
I think Khalid Hosseini is probably the most recognized.
yeah. He and Khaled Hosseini's A Thousand Splendid Suns was the inspiration for A Woman Is No Man. That novel was my inspiration because I remember reading it and feeling so, even though it was about the Afghanistani community, I felt as an Arab a lot of similarities in my own upbringing, and his writing style was always also really beautiful. So he was definitely the inspiration for me turning this into a novel.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Number one, who did you relate to? Well, first of all, did you like Dea? Did you relate to her the most personally?
I would say that I didn't relate personally to a character. I would say autobiographically that would probably be me. Like if I was to say which one was me, because that's the only character that's born in America and had to witness her parents, domestic abuse, and so that would be me as a character, and that's the character that wants to be a storyteller and then goes on to tell the story. So technically that would be me, but in terms of relating to characters, I would say that there's two other characters in the story that I felt connected to as well.
So how did you get these, where did you get this idea from? Are any of these, obviously these are true stories to some extent, that you came?
Well, they're based on my upbringing and some stories and women in our community.
And why was reading just such a terrible thing for women to do? They didn't want women to know about the outside world?
It wasn't that it was a terrible thing. It's just that at that time, again, this story was set not right now, it was 30 years ago. At that time, the women were encouraged to look after their house, help with the chores. It was a different time, just like in Jane Austen's time, she was sitting with suitors or whatever. It's not the same as women now. It was just a different time. And so at that time, women were not encouraged to go off and get an education, because then how would the population continue? They would have to stay home and tend to their brothers and get married. And so if the books would have given them other ideas about the world, obviously books are a window to the rest of the world. And so it was just a way to make sure that the culture didn't get, especially if the books were Western books. Isra read non-Western, poets like Rumi, Hafez, poets that are Arab. It's just having access to other worlds through books could be dangerous for a community that wants to maintain control. I'm gonna take your question.
I was just curious who you like to read.
Okay. I read everything. To give myself a break, though, from the depth of stuff, I like to read psychological thrillers. I just like the page turning quality of, but I love Jhumpa Lahiri, Khaled Hosseini, and, you know, the more literary writers I love. I loved Amy Tan growing up.
Do you feel like you have, because when you're describing your story, that's exactly who I thought of was Amy Tan, and how she's continued to thread, you know, her Chinese heritage in much of what she writes. So I kind of hope you do that, because I like that about her, you know. But
Yeah, I mean, it's part of who I am, so I'm sure that I'm not gonna not do it. I think there's a difference of doing it out of inspiration and fun, and then out of a need to defend or heal or explain or rewrite the narrative, or, you know, a responsibility to, you know, because there's a burden. I feel like I have a burden as a writer of color, as for a marginalized community, that I have to represent this community, and I can do it wrong, which is, I've done it wrong, which of course I've done it wrong because it's not my job to do alone. You know, when you walk into a bookstore and you pick up American Psycho, you don't think that all college students are serial killers in America, you know, because there's so many different American writers that you can pick and choose. But when there's only 3 Palestinian stories, and then you read one and you have no idea what Palestine is, you're like, oh yeah, they all beat their wives. You know, but then if you don't talk about that part, then the women, again, you're not telling their story because you're scared. So I'd like to move past that to a world where there's a lot of writers like me, and they're all telling different stories, like the rebel that is a queer and doesn't get married. And so like, oh, perfect, there's a Palestinian, that's queer fiction, that's the rebels are right there, there's a girl that doesn't want to wear the hijab, and, you know, the one that really loves being a mother and being a wife. You know, there's different stories. And then, oh, there's a woman who's my man. Like, there's a domestic abuse section right there. You know, except for like, this is, because I'm not the representative of the culture, but right now sometimes it feels like I am. So I'd like to like step away from it for a little bit and hopefully give more Palestinian women and men a chance to like rewrite some of our stereotypes, and then, you know, things will be different. Yes?
Have you any hope, and do you know if any Palestinian men have read your work?
Yes, I do. And actually I've gotten really great feedback really great feedback that this has helped them understand their sisters, their mothers, their wives, given them a bigger perspective outside of them on the, you know, the ways trauma affects both men and women in the culture. This book doesn't just talk about the way trauma affects the women, because the men are just as oppressed in different ways. They're given the sole responsibility of taking care of their families. They are still dealing with the trauma of the Israeli occupation, which is trickling down into the domestic home. They feel powerless, so then they have to exude power by, you know, being, you know, violent sometimes. So there is no white or black in the novel. It's really more about understanding that there's no victim or oppressor, that this is a hurt people, and hurt people hurt people. And so I have gotten really good feedback from the Palestinian community, the men especially. Any other questions?
I think we're out of time.
Just quickly, being the oldest of 9, how were you able to get to college? And did your parents encourage that at some point, or?
So I'm the eldest, so things are a lot different now from my younger siblings, as you guys know how it happens in families, of course. Luckily, all of us are educated, all of my entire family. I was 19 when I got married, and I got married to a guy. I sat with suitors, like that's how we got married. And my suitor lived in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. And so that's how I ended up in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. And so my number one thing was, I'm going to college. Like, you're not gonna stop me. And so I was really lucky that he didn't. I ended up going to state, getting my degrees from there, and then teaching here. And I've been here ever since, of course. But that's how I ended up here. But I think education was really important for me and my sisters, because we saw a life with women not being educated. So I'll give you a quick rundown. I have a master's degree and 2 bachelor degrees. My sister underneath me is a speech therapist. The one underneath her is a PA. The one underneath her is in a PhD program. The one underneath, my brother is a pharmacist. The one underneath her just got into med school. The one underneath her is a guidance counselor for school. So we've all, my parents weren't against education, I guess, but like I was the oldest, so I think with me, they were just pushing like, all right, get married, get married, get married, and like just worry about education later, which I did. But as I'm the oldest, so as they got down and down, they were a little bit more, all right, maybe you don't have to get married right now. Maybe you can start college and then, you know, like they just got looser and looser and looser. And like, you know, now my sister just got accepted to med school, and she's going off to live in a dorm, which if I had ever said that, I would be sliced, my neck would have been sliced off, you know? So it's different. And again, like, that's why I say it's like every family has different stories, let alone every, you know, where it's just, you know, we're all here with a unique life to have a unique mission. And this was mine so that I can have this mission, you know? If I had an easy life, I wouldn't have had this mission. You know, it's just, that's how I like to look at it. Like I'm grateful for everything. But I'm grateful for being here. Thank you so much. This was really fun. Thank you.